Hi everyone, my name is Natalie DC. Welcome back to my channel. I am a reader, writer, and artist here to talk about books with you, and art, and maybe a little bit of writing. In today's video, I will be giving you guys a wrap-up of all the orange books that I read in the month of February. I read a total of 9 orange books, 7 books, and 2 arcs. So without further ado, let's get started. The first orange book that I read in the month of February is Aquicorn, Cove by Kay O'Neill. This book is an adorable graphic novel with a really lovely art style about a young girl who visits her seaside hometown I believe couple years after her mother passes away. She visits with her father to the seaside hometown and over the course of the summer discovers the magical protection that is offered by the coral reef that surrounds the town. I really loved Kay O'Neill's first book of the Tea Dragon Society, but I really loved their art style, so I wanted to check out more of their books, and I'll probably be picking up the other 2 books of the Tea Dragon Society series, but I wanted to check out this book because it is orange, so it's perfect for my rainbow rating challenge. And I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. I think this book offers a really wonderful message about the importance of protecting the environment, specifically coral reefs, for its middle grade audience. I do wish there was a bit more world building in regards to the magic system, as aquicorns, they're never really mentioned in the book itself. They might have been mentioned once or twice, but really it's not really mentioned how their magic works, what they thrive off of. Like, I really would have loved to learn more about these wonderful creatures that Kay O'Neill has come up with. And yeah, I wish we got to see more of that in the book itself. But other than that, I really do believe this is a really wonderful middle grade graphic novel. So I gave it 4 stars, and I'll definitely be checking out more of Kay O'Neill's writing. And there's gay stuff in this book too. The next orange book that I read in the month of February is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This is my first read of Emily Henry's. I know, shocking. I do read romance, but not really a contemporary adult romance like Emily Henry and Sally Rooney, so I do want to get more into those types of books. So I picked up Emily Henry's People We Meet on Vacation. It has a beautiful orange cover. It is about these 2 once best friends who go on a vacation together in hopes of kind of rekindling their friendship, and the current timeline is kind of interspersed between years past in which they've done these annual vacations and when they were best friends. So it's kind of like dual timelines in that sense. So that was an interesting concept of structuring the novel. I thought that was pretty cool. Kind of confused me at the beginning because I was like, what's happening? Where are we starting in the timeline? I'm so confused, but that's just my tiny brain making things confusing for me. It is not Emily Henry's fault. But yeah, I really enjoyed this novel, even though I found it a bit too long and drawn out. I really enjoyed the chemistry and banter between Alex and Poppy. It made their friendship and relationship so much more special to me. I love how different they both are, and we as a reader get to see that, yet we also get to see how well they work together and why their friendship and relationship should continue. I don't believe this is dual perspectives, but if I'm wrong, just chalk it up to me reading this book a month ago. But yeah, this is not dual perspectives. It would have been interesting to see more of Alex's perspective, I think. There were a lot of chapters that were kind of repetitive in their nature, in which you know, there's a summary of years past in which Alex and Poppy go on a vacation. It's awesome, shenanigans are ensued, and the end is just like, oh, will we, won't we? You know, it was kind of very repetitive in that way. I think it would have been less repetitive if they had known each other for less time, like if they'd known each other for 5 years and they were a bit younger and we just went from 5 years to present day. I think that would have been less repetitive instead of doing it like 10 years. So we have to get through 10 vacations interspersed between the present day in which they're trying to go through this kind of vacation from hell. But yeah, I thought some chapters were a bit repetitive, which caused me to the middle was kind of drawn out in that way, the novel. And also the 3rd act, as we know, adult contemporary romances love to do a 3rd act conflict, no matter how little sense it makes. I didn't really enjoy this 3rd act conflict. I thought it was way too forced, wasn't necessary at all, but it had to end somehow, I guess. So other than that, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.25 stars. It definitely won't be my last read of Emily Henry's. So yeah, I'm glad I finally got to experience a first read of Emily Henry's. The next orange book that I read in the month of February is Bright Dead Things by Ada Limón. Hope I'm pronouncing her name right. Still don't know exactly how to pronounce her name. But I did read one of Ada Limon's poetry collections last month for my All the Red Books that I read in the month of January video. I really enjoyed that collection, so I decided to pick up this Orange Beauty for this month. This is another breathtaking collection of poetry about belonging, love, life, grief, and death. I related to these poems a bit more than The Carrying, which is the poetry collection that I read last month, so I did enjoy it in that way more of like relating to the subject matter that is being discussed. But I felt that the poems sort of lacked The Carrying's. Bright Dead Things was written prior to The Carrying, so I felt that it sort of lacked that cohesion that The Carrying has, where all the poems sort of fit into this one distinct theme and they all have this kind of through line throughout, whereas these poems in Bright Dead Things, they sort of have their own thing going on, which isn't a bad thing. It's nice when poems have one aesthetic or vibe or theme going throughout them so that there's a reason for them all to be in one collection together. So I would have liked to see more cohesion in that, but these are just nitpicky things. Overall, I really enjoyed the lovely verse that was in this poetry collection. My favorites of this collection were I Remember the Carrots, just the title already, it's just like chef's kiss. In a Mexican restaurant, I recall how much you upset me. And Oh Please Let It Be Lightning. Just these titles themselves are just so beautiful. I really enjoyed this collection and I definitely plan on reading more of Ada Limon's works, possibly for this challenge, the Rainbow Reading Challenge this year. We'll see. I gave this book 4.5 stars, by the way. The next orange book that I read in the month of February is The Days of Afrekete by Asali Solomon. I hope I'm pronouncing the title Afrekete correctly. I did look it up. So this is a riveting debut novel about two black women who fondly reminisce upon their college life and their college love affair while sort of slogging through their present-day monotonous lives. For debut work, the writing in this novel is so sublime. I love the detail and richness of this novel, and it's really reminiscent of work of Toni Morrison's such as Sula, which I did read. The story is engaging. It kept me entertained. Even though there are so many characters that this world sort of explores, it never felt like it was dragging or it was unnecessary. I was a little unsatisfied by the sort of lackluster ending. It was very vague. Again, with these types of novels, it usually goes that the story is so rich and powerful, but the ending, it sort of like drags off at the end, and it kind of disappoints me a little because I wish it had that sort of impactful boom ending that the rest of the novel has. But with that said, I really enjoyed this novel. I also wish we got to see more from Selena's point of view. Selena is sort of, Lizelle is the main character. She, for the good 2/3 of the book, is the main POV, but the last third we do get to see Selena's point of view. Selena and Lizelle had a love affair in college, and I really related to some of Selena's struggles, such as with her mental health, and I thought that would have been an interesting avenue to explore throughout this novel, so I do wish we got more of her perspective. All in all, however, I thought this was a phenomenal debut work. I gave it a solid 4 stars, and I definitely am planning on checking out Solomon's future works. I think she's definitely an author to watch out for. And yeah, I'm just overall really happy that I was able to pick this up for this challenge. The next orange book that I read in the month of February is Sleepwalking by Meg Wolitzer. This book was incredible. It is probably going to be on my top 10 favorite books of this year. This book was originally published in 1982 by Meg Wolitzer. It is the debut work of Meg Wolitzer, actually, who is a very iconic, renowned author whose works I have just now sort of stumbled into and tried to delve into. But this book is a dark, alluring character study that explores themes of grief, girlhood, and coming into one's own. It follows Claire Danziger, who is obsessed with the fictional poet Lucy Asher. She is part of this trio of girls on her college campus they're called the Death Girls, and they sort of hover around these female poets who have committed suicide. Her friends are fans of Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton, respectively. Claire Danziger, she is very obsessed over this female poet, Lucy Asher, who in the past, I think 2 years or so, committed suicide, which rocked Claire's world to the core. Claire kind of becomes intertwined with this trio of girls. They start doing sort of readings of each other's favorite poets, like poetry at night, and she slowly forms a relationship with Julian, who is sort of a jock on campus. As she sort of is intertwined with these different people, she is also trying to fulfill herself and ends up going on, I'll call it an expedition, in order to find herself in the midst of her obsessions with this dead female poet. As you can see, this novel has like such a weird, wacky premise. It's very similar in that way to Bunny by Mona Awad, which I've also read, but this book for me was even better than that book. I gave it a perfect 5 stars. I think this is a masterpiece of a novel. It explores its themes so graciously, so gently, and yet with such raw energy. The prose is gorgeous, and I loved the stream of consciousness narration. I loved the sort of well-rounded, relatable characters, as well as the balance of sort of a gloomy tone with this sort of wacky, quirky premise of a book. It's just all around balanced beautifully. There are a lot of POVs in this book, even though Claire's POV is the main one, and while they might seem unnecessary while reading, by the end of the book you will have realized how necessary they were to sort of forming this very well-rounded character study. Overall, I just really love this book. It's very special to me. I'll probably read it again, honestly, because there are a lot of, you know, little details with rich books such as these that you just don't pick up. I'd say this is probably an even better version of Sylvia Plath, The Bell Jar, which I also liked, but this one just takes it home for me, honestly. Sort of that character study of a mentally ill girl. And yeah, overall, again, I just really love this book. I highly recommend it if you haven't checked it out. It is a pretty famous book, so I'd be surprised if you haven't read it, but if you haven't, like I hadn't, I would definitely recommend. Gave it 5 stars, couldn't recommend more. The next orange book that I read in the month of February is Turning Japanese by Marinaomi. This was an ARC that I received from NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley for that. This is a reflective graphic novel memoir about the author's experiences in the mid-90s trying to learn Japanese. She's half Japanese, but she doesn't really have this connection to the language like she wants to, so she tries to learn Japanese by working at these different hostess bars around San Jose, California, where she lived, as well as in Japan when she travels there. She forms a relationship with a new partner after she breaks up with her old boyfriend, and it, according to her, was a very nasty breakup. All that combined with her trying to learn Japanese, trying to kind of connect with her heritage, which she wasn't really always connected with, all the while she's dealing with mental health issues, familiar relations, and illness/eating disorders. So sort of content warning for those. I really liked how these serious themes were balanced against the sort of cutesy art style, which regrettably is black and white, unfortunately, even though the cover is colorful. I really hate when graphic novels kind of clickbait you within that. They have a really beautiful, colorful cover, and then you open the book and it's like black and white inside. But I digress. It was a really cutesy art style, sort of reminiscent of those those chibi versions of Steven Universe in the Steven Universe cartoon. That's sort of what it reminded me of. So I like how that art style is balanced with the very serious themes that are covered. I really enjoyed this graphic novel overall. I enjoyed reading about the author's experiences. I thought they were very interesting and very worth telling a story about and writing a memoir about. I think it's a solid graphic novel memoir. I've really been enjoying graphic novel memoirs as of late, even though for a while I didn't even know that they existed. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think it would be a great read. But yeah, if you haven't checked out this book, I would highly recommend it. I just remembered the author does use they them pronouns. If I used any feminine pronouns earlier, I do retract those. The author does use they them pronouns. The next book that I read in the month of February is Season of Migration to the North by Tayeb Salih. Hope I'm pronouncing his name right. This is a Sudanese classic. It is very dark and mysterious. It was published in 1966, I believe, and explores themes of colonization, sexism, sexuality, and dreams versus reality. This is a frame narrative, meaning it's sort of a story within a story, and I really thought that worked for this classic. By the way, trying to explain the story is very complicated, I think, because of its frame narrative and being a story within a story. So I'd rather you just like pick up this book like blind, or just read the blurb on the back, because it's sort of hard to describe what happens in this book. As I said, it sort of balances that dreams versus reality, and sometimes it's hard to really figure out what's real versus what's fake, and I think that's like the point of the novel, but it's very hard to put into words. But in essence, this book tells the story of an enigmatic man named Mustafa Saeed. He is accused of killing 4 white women he was romantically involved with during his time in London. We are then taken through the narrator's eyes, who's sort of a Sudanese Nick Carraway in my view. We're sort of taking on his dreamy tour through North Africa as he witnesses firsthand the detrimental impacts of colonialism on these communities. I love how these two seemingly different universal problems, colonialism and sexism, they're sort of pitted against each other and compared and contrasted in this classic, which I think is very ahead of its time. And I was really fascinated by this comparison, because classic that came out in the 60s, and it's really impressive to me how ahead of its time these takes were on these two struggles sort of going hand in hand. Colonization is sort of painted as the white man triumphing over the black and brown people of North Africa, and that is compared to man kind of triumphing over women. So it's sort of compared and contrasted in that way, if that makes sense. Again, I'm not very good at explaining things, but I hope that made sense. But yeah, I loved specifically how that was done in this classic, and I gave it 4.25 stars for that alone. That combined with like sort of the dreamy tone of this book, the very beautiful lush writing, and again, going back to the sexism, I loved how when there are characters that the narrator encounters who are being very blatantly sexist to the female characters, it is actually challenged by the narration and the narrator, which is something I've never before seen in a classic. I don't know if I'm not looking hard enough or if it's just a product, those are just a product of its time, but for this book, like, it was just so interesting and fascinating and intriguing for me to see that in this book, sexism is challenged and pitted against this other universal issue of colonialism. I thought it was a fantastic exploration of those two subjects. The ending, again, was a bit anticlimactic, as I found with these, like, classics. You have like a really strong story and it's kind of, it fizzles out at the end. But again, I don't really mind that because I just loved reading this book. I thought the prose was so poetic. Honestly, it could have been a poetry collection in of itself. Like, it was so beautiful. Honestly, I really love this book, and a beautiful orange cover. And yeah, I'm really happy that I got to read this for this month's challenge. I just loved it all around, and I definitely, this is another book that I will in the future try to reread, because again, there are a lot of details that kind of get swept under the rug, swept under the surface of this beautiful dreamlike poetry. I would love to go back and sort of analyze those details that probably say even more critiques about colonialism and sexism that I didn't pick up upon first read. But yeah, if any of this sounds interesting to you, I would highly recommend you check it out. This is my first read from a Sudanese author, and yeah, I just found it all around so interesting and so beautiful. So yeah, highly recommend. I gave it 4.25 stars. Again, the ending kind of bumped it down for me, but it's whatever. I really enjoyed it. So we're down to the last two books. The last book, because the last book, the second one I'm going to talk about is an arc. So the last book that I read, last orange book that I read in the month of February is Pew by Catherine Lacey. This is another book that has a really strange premise, so I'm going to try to explain it. Basically, this racially ambiguous, genderless person is found on a church pew in a very small, unnamed American town. The town names this person Pew. They don't know what to make of Pew because, again, Pew is racially ambiguous and genderless. They don't know what gender Pew is, what race Pew is. Everyone seems to have a different vision of what Pew looks like, so it makes sort of the townsfolk uneasy and tense, especially because they find Pew the week before a very special festival that they call the Forgiveness Festival. So this is basically a sort of melancholic exploration of the townsfolk. It is in Pew's perspective, but we don't really get to see much of Pew's personality and opinions pop out in this book. Instead, Pew is sort of this conduit for the townsfolk to kind of air out their grievances about other people in the town and kind of the way things are going in this town. So yeah, it's more of an exploration of the townsfolk, in my opinion, than Pew themselves. Again, a super interesting premise for a story, and it definitely gave me the vibes of reading a fable or a short story, which I think this story could have definitely worked really well as sort of a fable for children, or even like a fiction story. And the story was divided into 20 to 30 page sections, so it was very readable. I did appreciate that. It was divided into very readable chunks. You could read one section, take a break, read another section, take a break, and before you know it, you'll be at the end of the book. So I did appreciate that for my small brain folks such as myself. I really need to break up reading into small chunks in order for me to get through. I definitely wish a lot more goes on in the end. Again, this is another story that it has a really interesting premise, but not a lot happens. It's sort of just the vibes, you know? And then at the end, not much happens. We're sort of building up to this Forgiveness Festival. It's very Midsummer-esque. We're like, oh, what fucked up shit is gonna happen at this festival? And let me tell you, just a little bit of spoilers, not much happens. I promise you. It's not that crazy. It's not as crazy as Ari Aster's Midsommar movie. This is like listed as a horror on Goodreads. I didn't really find it horrific or scary at all. It's very mysterious, very like, oh, what's gonna happen? But not much happens, I tell you. So yeah, a bit disappointing there. Like I said, I really enjoyed reading the story. The writing style was cool. I liked how the dialogue were in italics instead of quotation marks. I thought that was an interesting writing choice. But yeah, other than that, the book sort of fell flat for me, felt a bit pointless by the end, which is not something you want for a book with a premise so unique and interesting such as this. So I did give it 3.75 stars. Again, enjoyed it during the reading process. Afterwards, pretty forgettable in my opinion, which is unfortunate, but I do plan on checking out more of Catherine Lacey's works, as I think she really has a really interesting and unique vision with her writing, just from reading this first book here. So yeah, I will check out more of her works, but this one wasn't the greatest for me. And finally, the last orange book or arc that I read in the month of February is Always the Almost by Edward Underhill. I think this is my first proper YA contemporary romance of this year, which is sort of a sin, a cardinal sin, I think, because my reading life has been built off of the backs of YA contemporary romances. So my apologies. I'll try to work on that and try to read more of those coming months, but this was an arc. I'm really appreciative of NetGalley for gifting me this arc. This is a feel-good YA romance, like I said. It is about a queer trans boy named Miles. He's sort of trying to figure out who he is on the precipice of this classical piano competition. He wants to pass the regionals and go to the nationals of this piano competition, so he's very much under the pressure. During this really stressful time, Miles meets this new boy in town named Eric Mendez, who is a proudly queer cartoonist from Seattle. And he's very respectful of Miles. He, unlike the people in Miles's hometown, he asks Miles's pronouns, and he cares about art as much as Miles does. So Miles really relates to Eric, and eventually, throughout the course of the book, they fall in love. This is definitely not a slow burn of a romance, which did surprise me a bit, because usually the YA romance I read, the characters don't get together until the last third of the novel, and then there's some sort of conflict. But I'd say within the first third, the two are together, which was really interesting to me. It's not something I've read before in YA romance, but I was very intrigued by it. I loved Eric so much. He was my favorite character. I wish we got to see more. I actually wish he got his own POV. You know me, if I love a character, I'm gonna want them to have a POV, no matter how it will affect the story. I don't care. I really love the writing. This is a debut novel by Edward Underhill. It's an Own Voices book about the queer trans experience, and I really loved the writing and how it let Miles's personality shine through while dealing with these very serious topics of such as dealing with gender dysphoria and dealing with sort of friendships moving on and trying to kind of rebuild and reshape these friendships that have lasted so long. I found Miles a tad unlikable, which isn't unheard of in YA romance, but usually the main characters are sort of sugar-coated so that the readers don't hate them. I didn't hate Miles, it's just some things Miles did really irked me. And while this is for the most part solved by the end of the novel, yeah, Miles was just a bit, you know, he did something and I was just like, yeah. So if you're not a fan of unlikable characters, I don't think this is too unbearable. It's just something I noticed. But yeah, again, not very much of a slow burn romance. We kind of fly right through that to sort of the two getting together and then them having to deal with their relationship throughout the course of the book, which again, I don't mind. I do prefer slow burns, but this worked all the same for me. I gave it 4.25 stars, and yeah, I just thought it was a really cute, wholesome read about this queer trans boy trying to find himself while playing piano. Those are all the orange books that I read in the month of February, guys. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, if you enjoy content such as this and bookish and artsy content in general, I would highly encourage you to comment down below, give this video a like, share it, and subscribe for more content such as this. And before you go, guys, I just want to let you know the debut poetry chapbook, Blue Pearl, is available for purchase from Bottle Cap Press. I will never stop self-promoting. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I highly encourage you to pick that up if you're interested, linked in the description. But yeah, I hope you have a great day, week, month, whatever you're feeling, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye!